The 3.24 Challenge League Necropolis is launching soon. In this video, I want to go over everything we currently know about Necropolis' league mechanic and rewards, potential farming strategies, as well as the implications this league mechanic will have on what build you should play. That way, you can jump into the league with everything you need to hit the ground running. First up, let's go over everything we know about the league mechanic. Necropolis is a crafting league with a lot of similarities to Bestiary, Harvest, and Delve. Before entering each zone, you'll get a UI pop-up, the Lantern of Aramor. This UI will show you a number of spirits, their associated monster modifier, as well as every monster pack that can natively spawn in that zone. Using this UI, you can move the spirits to whichever monsters you wish, assigning the modifiers to a portion of those monsters. The Lantern UI also shows detailed information on the monster packs in that zone, including crucial information like pack density, allowing you to assign modifiers to monsters that will have diminished or reduced effect, or maximize rewards from high tier or beneficial modifiers. Notably, this league mechanic affects all areas, including league areas like heist contracts and subzones such as the Abyssal Depths. Something I really want to highlight about this mechanic is that it is mandatory. You cannot opt out of this mechanic. Every single zone you enter will have haunted spirits, and they will make monsters stronger and more dangerous. I'll talk a bit about this more later, but you're going to really want to make sure your build can handle these difficulty spikes. The spirits you can find in the Lantern come in two types: the more common haunted spirits and the rare devoted spirits. Haunted spirits come in a variety of tiers, with higher tiers having stronger monster modifiers and granting better rewards to slain monsters haunted by those spirits. These better rewards come in the form of increased chance for the monster to have unresolved anguish, which just means the monster drops a collectible corpse when slain, increased drop chance of all flame embers, and increased odds of getting devoted spirits per haunted monster slain for future lanterns. Of note, all of this only applies to monsters that natively spawn in that zone. Monsters that spawn in later from league mechanics will not be haunted, and in fact won't even show up on the Lantern. The second type of spirits are devoted spirits. Unlike haunted spirits, these spirits grant modifiers with effects that are beneficial to the player. This can include things like Magic Find, increased XP, and monsters that spawn things like Lesser Shrines, Strong Boxes, and the Nameless Seer. Your odds of getting devoted monsters increase based on how many haunted spirits you've slain in the previous zone, scaling up with the tier of the haunted spirit. This means that placing high-tier, more difficult modifiers on monsters with high density will lead to more devoted spirits in the following zone. If you aren't interested in the crafting portion of Necropolis, it's likely that this will be a way to juice your maps and get extra rewards. Not only will there likely be devoted spirits that are highly profitable, but it's worth noting that these modifiers likely grant monsters increased item quantity and rarity, the same way that modifiers on rare monsters already do, allowing you to scale up your loot regardless of what modifiers you get. Next up is All Flame Embers. These are a consumable item that can drop off haunted monsters, and can be used with the Lantern UI to replace packs of monsters with different special monster packs. Most of these special monsters have additional items they can drop, including some very exciting ones that can drop tattoos. Notably, these special monster packs will inherit the density of the replaced monster, so you probably want to use these on the densest monster pack available to you to maximize how many you get in your map. Something important about All Flame Embers is that at least some of them can only drop from specific content, or perhaps even specific monsters. It has been confirmed that there are, at the very least, Heist exclusive and Abyssal Depths exclusive All Flame Embers that can only drop from their specific areas. It's possible that this is true for all Flame Embers, and these items might be linked to specific maps or content types, but this is currently unclear and is something we'll have to figure out once the league goes live. The final effect of haunted spirits is unresolved anguish. Some percentage of haunted monsters will have this modifier, which causes them to become a collectible corpse when slain. These corpses have a crafting modifier and inherit the name of the monster's type, and the monster's level. It's currently unclear the extent to which the slain monster affects the possible crafting modifiers of its corpse. It's been stated by GGG that at least some of the monsters from All Flame Embers have exclusive crafts associated with them. The examples given being the Heist and Abyss corpses, letting you craft Stygian vices and experimented items. If it turns out that this applies to all monsters and sought after crafts only come from specific monsters or maps, then that will be league defining, and much of the strategy of this league will revolve around trying to farm those specific crafts. Finally, it's time to talk about the crafting part of this crafting league: Exorcism Crafting. The corpses you collect from slain haunted monsters can be consumed en masse to create a single item. Each corpse has a crafting modifier that influences the item that is created. The way this works is that you'll go to the Necropolis graveyard and you'll bury however many corpses you wish, and then exorcise all of them, crafting an item with all of their combined effects. There are supposedly a lot of graves, 80 to 100 apparently, allowing you to really invest in crafting an exceptionally powerful item if you're willing to invest that much. Some of these modifiers are meta modifiers and care about things like adjacent graves, monster types, or even monster names of other buried monsters. These effects look to be very powerful and will cause setting up your exorcism craft to be something of a puzzle. It won't just come down to what corpses you use, but where you're going to bury them. This crafting is far from deterministic, however. You can't even choose the item base of the item you're crafting, only broad categories like shield or boots. In order to get the item base you want, you will need to use corpse modifiers that influence the item base. One of the new types of corpse modifiers is something called modifier tier rate. This is a new way to influence items to have higher tiers of affixes. The way this works is that as you get modifier tier rating, it cuts off the lowest tiers possible for a given affix, and slightly boosts the weighting of the remaining tiers. The examples given were that 50 modifier tier rating cuts off the bottom third of tiers, 100 tier rating cuts off the bottom half, and 200 tier rating cuts off the bottom 2/3. Now, while cutting off tiers of affixes like this does mean that if you hit that affix, you'll get a higher tier, it actually doesn't do a whole lot to ensure you'll actually get that affix in the first place. This means that you're going to want to combine modifier tier rating with other modifiers that increase your chance of rolling that type of affix. Another interesting use of modifier tier rating is using it on affix types that you do not want, in order to reduce the chance of getting that affix in your item. Using them this way would be like using a far weaker version of fossils that block specific types of affixes from rolling on an item. But with 80 to 100 graves to bury corpses in, you might have the graves to spare to block affixes like this. When you're not crafting, these corpses are stored in the morgue, an area of the graveyard you can visit. They can also be viewed via a UI in your hideout. When viewing corpses in any location, you can destroy unwanted corpses by clicking a small flame button to cremate them, or you can itemize them by using an item purchased from Aramor for 1 Chaos Orb. This functions the same way as itemizing beasts, allowing you to trade them with other players. One very unusual thing about this league is that GGG has chosen to add passives related to Necropolis League to the Atlas passive tree. Many of these nodes simply buff the rewards you get and look to be more or less mandatory if you're planning to focus on farming Necropolis content. There are also several keystones that radically change how Necropolis works, and to me, it seems like these keystones are geared towards players that don't want to directly engage with Necropolis League, allowing you to turn off elements of the league in exchange for a more useful reward boost. Having said that, it's difficult to really evaluate them until you've played Necropolis and have a better handle on things. This all leads to the big questions. What sort of farming strategies will be best for Necropolis? More so than in previous leagues, it feels very difficult to make any solid predictions this time. The endgame has received a huge shakeup in 3.24 with the addition of Tier 17 maps and the massive Scarab rework. However, I do believe there are some major insights we can glean from all this. For one, crafting-related rewards do not scale with other league mechanics. Only the native monsters in a map can be haunted. This means that not only will other league mechanics that spawn in monsters not give you any corpses to craft with, they will, in fact, only slow you down. It seems that the only way to scale crafting-related rewards is with pack size, and the Necropolis Atlas passives. Well, that and just raw clear speed. On the other hand, Embers seem purpose-built for players that want to ignore the crafting elements and just focus on farming drops. It's likely that both Embers and their rewards scale with increased item quantity. These may lead to a situation where you're double dipping on item quant. You both get more Embers to drop, and then your Ember exclusive monsters also drop more loot. So, if you decide to focus on the corpse gathering, you're going to need to find ways to scale the number of native monsters in your map as high as you can. This means getting most of the Necropolis Atlas passives is basically mandatory, and focusing on getting pack size as high as possible. In order to boost the pack size, you're going to want to focus on increased map modifier effect. There are a number of new Atlas passives that let you multiply your pack size to extremely high values, if you can handle the increased difficulty. As far as making use of league mechanics, most of them will only slow you down. If you're doing a harvest or incursion, you're just spending time killing monsters that can't drop corpses. The only league mechanics that could potentially boost the number of native monsters in a map is shrines, and I'm not 100% certain that actually works. Some of the new scarabs definitely will work, however, and can add extra haunted monsters to your maps. The most extreme version of this focus on corpse farming is going for the new Back to Basics keystone. This keystone disables all extra content in your maps, but presumably doesn't disable Necropolis. It's the currently active league and is not listed as extra content. Which, if you're going all in on farming corpses, is totally fine. All those other league mechanics are just going to slow you down anyways. In exchange, you get an average of 40% more modifier effect. Not increased, more modifier effect. This will most likely be the best way to farm for corpses, and could end up being wildly profitable if Exorcism Crafting ends up anywhere near as busted as previous crafting leagues like Harvest and Synthesis. The other side of Necropolis farming, however, is Embers. This is the item drop farming side of Necropolis, and if you're looking to keep the Magic Find train rolling from Affliction League, this is your stop. Although, maybe lower your expectations a little bit, as I don't think anything Necropolis has to offer will match that level of insane loot. There are two parts of Ember farming the Embers themselves, or using Embers to farm the monsters they spawn in your maps. The details of Ember drops are currently unknown, so it's hard to evaluate whether players that focus on farming Embers will be doing both halves of this or only one. We know that some Embers drop exclusively from specific content that create their own zones, like Heist and Abyssal Depths. If this is the case for all of the valuable Embers, then Ember farming will largely consist of players engaging with those league mechanics, selling their Embers to Ember monster farmers. If the best Embers drop from maps, then it will be a case of double dipping with increased item quantity. The goal will be to farm more Embers as you use them, and maybe even over-sustain to sell the extras. Because you're replacing monster packs with Embers, you want to make sure you're always replacing high-density monster packs. You might even want to consider running maps with less efficient layouts that have more monster packs overall in order to maximize the value you get out of expensive Embers. Beyond that, you just want to maximize pack size, increased item quantity, and effects that scale loot like Delirium. There are also Atlas passives that increase the effect of Haunted Spirit modifiers. Presumably, these modifiers grant the monster some amount of quant and rarity, and taking these nodes should further scale your loot. And finally, build considerations. Something I really want to emphasize here is that this league will be strictly harder than standard. This league mechanic is mandatory, it makes monsters stronger, and you cannot opt out of it. On top of that, this patch is introducing a lot of new, challenging endgame content. As a result, I strongly recommend playing a tried and true meta build. You don't want to run the risk of getting stuck because your janky build can't deal with the increased difficulty. Because this is a crafting league focused on crafting powerful rare items, builds that use a lot of unique items, such as many minion builds, will be at a disadvantage here. They will not be able to take full advantage of the powerful crafting options Necropolis offers, and as a result will likely struggle to keep up with other builds using the league mechanic to print what would be mirror tier items in other leagues. As for the specific type of build you should play, you kinda have to make a bit of a gamble here. The fact that corpses don't scale from effects that increase difficulty but multiply loot, like Delirium, imply a clear speed build designed to clear maps as fast as possible at the expense of top-end power may be the way to go. However, we just don't know a lot about how the endgame is going to shake out. If the best corpses come from side content like Heist or Delve, clear speed may not be king. We also don't know how much these haunted spirits can scale up the difficulty in the endgame, or what endgame juicing is going to look like at all with all these new scarabs and options at our disposal. A well-rounded build may be a safe bet, and that's exactly what I'm planning on doing. I'm planning on just playing an Explosive Arrow Elementalist again. It's reliable and can adapt to whatever type of content ends up being the best way to farm Necropolis, even if it will never hit the insane clear speed that some other builds might. That's all for this video. In the description and comments below, I've linked my written guide to Necropolis with all the information we have available to us. This guide will be updated as we learn more, so you ought to bookmark it to stay up to date on everything. I'd also love to hear what you guys are thinking about Necropolis. Are you planning to focus on corpses or embers? Or other league mechanics altogether? Any spicy ideas for all the new scarabs we're getting? Some of the combos seem pretty nutty. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.